John, in searching for ultimate reality, God, if you will, if there is a God, of late I've been baffled by a blizzard of alternative concepts of God. I know you have something called ultimism, and I'm wondering how that could fit into these alternative concepts.
Yes, my idea of ultimism is a general framework idea that can provide a structure for discussion of alternative conceptions of God. For one thing, it helps us to be sure that we're really talking about God. The idea of God, as I understand it, is a religious idea. And so you might ask, what does it take for such an idea to really be religious? And that's where ultimism comes in. I say that to be a religious idea, the idea has to entail that there is something that is ultimate, but not just any old ultimate reality will do. The sort of ultimate reality that scientists might see themselves as searching for would not be sufficient to count as a religious idea. But that's part of it, only one part. The kind of idea that we're talking about has three parts. The first is one that naturalistic scientists certainly could agree with, that we're talking about a reality that is metaphysically ultimate. By that I mean something that is the deepest fact about the nature of things. But to get a religious idea, we have to add something more to that. Secondly, a point about value, that this is a reality that is unsurpassably valuable. Religion is about value. And thirdly, that this value can contribute to something to us. So that it has to be soteriologically ultimate as well. So those three kinds of ultimacy.
That means kind of a saving opportunity or something.
Yes, that would be a way of talking about how our own lives are affected by this reality. Okay, it could be something that's just distant and doesn't affect us in any way at all. In that case, it would not yet be a religious ultimate.
So you need these three characteristics,
three components,
for an ultimate reality to be counted as God in the biggest sense of God, or something religious
and then
beyond the physical.
That's right.
If you will.
And then you've got something of which there can be alternative conceptions, right?
Sure,
if you're just talking about the narrow traditional theistic idea, well, you can get alternative conceptions of that just by going to the Baptist church over there, and the Methodist church over there, and so on. But that's not very interesting. We want a much broader framework idea for all religious investigation, and that's what my idea of ultimism tries to provide, an idea that combines those three components. But it's still very general, even when you've said that there is something, if you do, that is metaphysically, axiologically, and soteriologically ultimate. You still haven't defined it.
And in simple language, it means there's an ultimate reality in terms of its being, an ultimate reality in terms of its value,
that's right,
and an ultimate reality in terms of how it affects us.
Yes.
Those three categories.
Right.
Okay.
Ultimate in those three ways. Now, once you've set that out, you've got this framework idea, then you can start thinking about how various more specific ideas might exemplify it, might fit into that framework. And so, for example, that blizzard of ideas you were mentioning, they include notions like panentheism,
right, sure,
or pantheism,
right,
and developmental theism, and you name it. There are all kinds of
value as ultimate, non-person Christianity. There's a lot of different variants that.
So we could see whether they really count as alternative conceptions of God by first having set up this framework idea. Okay, that's what we mean by God. So.
Give it a whirl.
A pantheistic picture of God. Does it provide us with an answer to the question, what is metaphysically ultimate? What's the deepest fact of the nature of things? And I think pantheism at least tries to do so, at least when we've got a religious notion, a religious pantheism. And similarly, with regard to value, the pantheist will think that God, as she conceives God, is unsurpassably valuable. This is the most important fact about the nature of reality.
That God is the world and the world is God.
Yes, the pantheist will think that the world is God, or God is the world in some way, and that, of course, can be defined variously. But by bringing to bear this idea of ultimism, I'm trying to provide a framework for thinking about pantheism as well as a host of others.
Right.
And we can think about how they claim there to be a reality that's metaphysically ultimate, how they claim there to be a reality that's axiologically and also soteriologically ultimate, and think about the plausibility of those claims. One reason for wanting to have this sort of a general idea as we begin is just that fact that we are still beginning. We're still at the beginning of our discussion of these religious ideas. So we need a framework within which to think about them.
So let's look at panentheism.
Okay.
How would you judge it on the three axes?
Panentheism, the claim that the world is in God in some way. Well, one of the problems I have with panentheism to begin with is how to understand it. The world is in God.
But God exceeds the world.
Includes the world in some way. God's reality includes the world, but also transcends it, exceeds it. So there's not an entire distinction between God and the world on this view, panentheism. But nonetheless, God is said to be in a kind of saving relation to the world, and it's by coming to know God and relate oneself properly to God that one can experience the highest fulfillment in life. Okay, so this, counts as soteriologically ultimate, this picture of the divine. Metaphysically ultimate, well, then you need to check a little more closely to see, what exactly is the relation between this God and the world? Does God create the world on this picture of things? Traditional theism is more unproblematic in that respect. It allows for a clear distinction between God and the world, and God is the creator of the world. So one of the questions you can ask the panentheist is, exactly how is God metaphysically ultimate on your scheme of things? That will provide greater clarity as to what sort of view we're dealing with here, and also help us to confirm that it really is a religious view, that it really is a conception of God.
What about the view that the ultimate reality is value? This is very different in that it is certainly not a person, but not even God. It's an ultimate value. It certainly fulfills your number two because it is value, and that's one of your two characteristics. But on the other axes...
I think you might need a little bit more than just the claim that the ultimate is value. You might say that there's some sort of principle having to do with value.
Yes, right.
That structures everything, that structures reality. So, for example, it might more specifically be the idea of ethical requiredness or something like that, that somehow the world comes to be because it's ethically required that there be a world, all right? So this is a principle, it has to do with value. A principle, though, that helps us to understand why the world exists, gives an answer to the metaphysical question. Okay? It provides the most basic fact about the nature of things.
And that's sufficient, even though it's very vague. It's a principle. It's not a person. Right. It's not. It's not the physical world. It's not.
Yeah.
It seems a little weak on the metaphysical side. Strong on the value side.
What you see, what we had to do here was to develop it a little bit. Just saying that the ultimate is value. That doesn't do the trick for me. Okay? That doesn't seem like a religious notion. If you say that it's a principle of ethical requiredness, now you've got something you can work with. And you can say, does this principle structure all reality? Is this where reality comes from?
The key is requiredness, right? Because that makes it an action step?
That's right. That suggests that value,
is a force?
Some fact about value requires that the world exists. Okay? And so if some fact about value requires that the world exists, then that fact is metaphysically ultimate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's a fact about value, well, then we've got the axiological component, especially if we're thinking that it represents unsurpassable value.
That's the easy one.
Yeah, I suppose. And if by understanding this and assimilating it, internalizing it, and living according to it, we somehow can achieve the deepest value in our own lives, well, then it's soteriologically ultimate too. My suggestion is, we've got this framework idea. We can think about ideas like panentheism in relation to it, see whether they really amount to alternative conceptions of God, and also get more clarity as to exactly what they are. Because just as your example shows, these ideas can be very vague. And we need to give them at least some content in order to see how they might fill out the framework idea of ultimism.